Thoughts ahead of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. versus Andrzej Fonfara. I believe the fight is at a catch weight of £172. Now, Chavez Jr. is a guy who's been going up and up and up in weights. It's not too long ago that we saw him getting outboxed by Sergio Martinez at middleweight. We then saw him move up to super middleweight. Now, as far as I'm aware, his super middleweight fights were two tight-ish fights with Brian Vera, who most would not consider a top 20 super middleweight. My point is, there's some suggestion that Chavez Jr. wasn't quite the same fighter at super middleweight as perhaps he was at middleweight. And I think that's why it's concerning that, despite the fact the fight's at a catchweight, that he's now moved up again to light heavyweight. I think Chavez Jr. is a big guy. You know, he's tall, he's strong, he's physically built, you know. And obviously you don't want a guy as he gets older to be cutting too much weight. But at the same time, he's also a guy who's been very inactive and who's had discipline problems outside of the ring. So my question is, why is he going up in weight? Is it just his body maturing, or is it more to do with the discipline and the inactivity? And how is that going to affect him as a fighter? Chavez Jr. has got an iron chin, one of the best chins in the game. I don't expect that he's going to start getting knocked about at £172 because he's shown such an iron jaw already. Having said that, fighting guys like Sergio Martinez is a very different ballgame to fighting genuine light heavyweights. And he's going to find that against Fonfara because he may be the stronger man in terms of, you know, the size of his chest, the size of his back against Fonfara. But Fonfara is tall. Fonfara has possibly got a bigger frame. I know he's slightly lanky, but he's a rangy guy and he's a taller man, and that's a dynamic that Chavez Jr. won't be too familiar with from his professional experience. Now, Fonfara, he's not a fighter who sets the world alight, but there's a lot to like about him. You know, he went the distance with Adonis Stevenson. Now, Chavez Jr. can punch, but the fact that he's got several knockouts, or you know, I think he's got like 32 knockouts, but the fact he's got loads of knockouts at 160 does not mean he's going to be knocking out guys at light heavyweight. When you look at Bernard Hopkins, for example, he moved up from middleweight to light heavyweight and suddenly become a non-puncher. Not that he was ever like a fearsome Golovkin-style puncher, but nevertheless, you know, sometimes going up these weight classes means that your punching power is reduced. Now, for a guy like Fonfara, who's proven he can go the distance against Adonis Stevenson, I think it's very unlikely that Chavez Jr. knocks him out. I think this one goes rounds. I think it goes the distance. Now, Fonfara, he's not a huge puncher like a Stevenson or a Kovalev, but again, he's a guy whose power is worth noting. I mean, he dropped Adonis Stevenson, for example. Now, Chavez Jr., as I say, got an iron jaw. Fonfara isn't the hardest puncher out there. Realistically, I don't see either man knocking the other guy out. I think both are durable. I know Fonfara's been stopped earlier on in his career, but the way he handled business against Stevenson makes me think that he's a durable guy. I think it goes to the distance. And I think, I've spoken to a lot of people in boxing whose opinion I respect about this, and a lot of people are tipping Fonfara to score the upset here. I mean, there are a lot of intangibles with this fight. You've got Chavez's inactivity, the fact that Chavez has never fought an elite fighter above £160. I mean, the best fighters Chavez has fought and beaten, you know, like Sergio Martinez, obviously, Andy Lee, I guess you could say. Both of those guys are probably small for middleweight, you know. So he's fighting guys who've been small at middleweight, like Andy Lee, Sergio Martinez. now he's going up against light heavyweights. I mean, Chavez's power, Chavez's chin, may not correlate, may not carry across to that light heavyweight division. You've also got to factor in the inactivity. You've got to factor in the lack of discipline. And if you consider that this fight is likely going to go rounds, are those going to be really, really detrimental as this fight goes on? Will the fact that he maybe hasn't been the most disciplined individual outside the ring start to affect him in rounds 9, rounds 10, etc.? Especially given that he's facing an opponent who's probably bigger than any opponent he's faced before. Especially as he's faced an opponent who's used to taking punches from bigger men than any of Chavez's previous victims. I mean, the other thing about Chavez Jr., right, there's a lot to like about him. He's a warrior, he's in interesting fights, but the guy can be outboxed. I mean, if I was him, I'd have been inclined to maybe more go down the Carl Froch route than Fonfara. I appreciate that Carl Froch is a better fighter than Fonfara, but it's about risk-reward, isn't it? And a guy like Andrzej Fonfara, who's relatively unknown, certainly to the casual fan, it's quite a risky fight. I mean, Chavez, I know he had success in the last round, but he pretty much got schooled by Sergio Martinez. Obviously he had the two debatable performances against Brian Vera. The first one extremely debatable. I mean, Chavez is a guy who can be outboxed by an elite fighter. The question is, how elite do we consider Fonfara? But maybe the fact that this is a sort of upper second tier fighter in a new weight division is enough to propel him to someone who can outbox Chavez Jr. I don't know. It really depends how Chavez turns up, how he is at the weight. There's a lot of intangibles here, but I don't rule Fonfara out whatsoever. I think Chavez is a guy who can be outboxed. He hasn't looked very good recently, in my opinion. I mean, when was the last time he looked devastating? How do we know how he's going to respond after the inactivity? How do we know he's going to respond to the new weight class? I think this is a really, really tough fight, and one that I possibly wouldn't have been inclined to take if I was Team Chavez. I think stylistically it's not the best matchup for him. And although Chavez understandably is favourite, I'd be inclined to have a look at Fonfara here. It's an interesting fight. The fact that this is a catchweight at 172 tells me that Chavez is probably going to be, and people will be better informed on this than I am, but he probably will be looking to campaign at 168 as opposed to 175 in the long run. Hopefully this is just a case that he's not wanting to make 168 for his return fight. Having said that, I note with interest that this fight is for some Mickey Mouse version of some governing body's light heavyweight title. So the fact that they paid a sanctioning fee there and the fact that they put that on the line, perhaps the plan is to campaign at light heavyweight. I don't know. I'm interested. To hear people's thoughts on that. But it's tough, really. I suspect that Chavez Jr. is possibly not going to develop into an elite super middle or an elite light heavy. I feel he can be outboxed, and I feel the advantages he's enjoyed at 160 may not come up to the new divisions. Obviously he's got so much money, so much celebrity, so much intrigue behind him. There may be scopes for him to be steered to world title fights against easier opponents. At light heavyweight, that's difficult because Sergey Kovalev holds the majority of the belts. Adonis Stevenson holds the other belt. There aren't too many world champs to go around. I still think Carl Froch is his best option. I think stylistically that's a very entertaining fight. I'd slightly edge to Froch, but it's a winnable fight for both guys. But all of that goes out the window, really, if he gets done by Fonfara. And I think that's a distinct possibility. It's not a fight that I would stick my neck out on the line. It's not a fight that I've got an overly strong opinion on either way. But let's put it this way. Fonfara is a live underdog, and it'll be really interesting to see how this one goes. Let me know your thoughts. Keen to discuss as always. Do you agree with me this will go rounds? Interested to discuss that.